moving on to our next session on scaling learning effectiveness in the age of AI with conversational role plays. Introducing our thought leader, Mr. Arun Subramanian, co-founder of Growiz.ai. Mr. Arun Subramanian is a co-founder of Growiz.ai, leveraging his passion for travel and technology to address client pain points with data-driven insights. He holds a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering and an MBA from IIM Ahmedabad. A huge round of applause for Mr. Arun Subramanian.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Am I audible at the back? Okay. So I think I wanted to kind of share here some of the thoughts that we had in terms of. Okay, I'm sorry about this. I think I'll just put this up when I have something more substantial to share. So I think So I'm Arun, founder of Growiz.ai. So we are an IIM Ahmedabad alumni company. We've been doing work in the area of learning for the last decade. And so we work with over 500,000 plus learners across companies like Aditya Birla Group, HDFC Group, banks like IDFC, Axis, Kotak, etc. So a big part of what we do is to help learners learn better, which I'm sure a lot of other companies do. But one of the things that really made a difference for us, when we went and spoke to our clients was how do we kind of make this learning more contextual, and how do we kind of ensure that whatever people are learning is actually implemented at their workplace. And a lot of times the implementation happens with their team members, it happens with cross-functional teams, it happens with customers, etc. And more often than not, neither any of us sitting in this room nor even their managers are able to be there at the moment of truth. It's all hearsay. It's like, did the program work well? Yes. Were you able to use this learning? Absolutely yes. But is the result shown? Maybe, maybe not. And there's no clear way of really looking at what transpired. So that's when we looked at creating Growiz. So the whole idea of Growiz is how are you really able to ensure that we are able to contextualize learning at scale, and how we are able to ensure that we put people in places, in positions where they are able to implement this learning. So I think that's broadly what the whole focus is. Can you just try putting this up again? So I think these are really the problems that we tried to solve, and this is where we said we're going to use the power of AI-based role plays. So the idea, when we started looking at creating and bringing AI as part of this learning, because I think that's something that all of us here are trying to do. So we had a lot of questions saying, hey, will AI work? How will it work? Where will it work? And we had questions on all these four. I'm really sorry about this part. Okay, so I think I'll just go commando without the presentation here. Okay, so I think the whole idea was how are you going to really create role plays that kind of bring in our context, and that kind of brings in the learner's context. Because one thing that we started out when we looked at role plays was is that, hey, what happens with InfoSec and security? Then are we going to really use audio or video? Because the whole idea was that, hey, can we put people in positions where they could have these conversations as they go along? Then people said, hey, but why don't you have videos? Let's also do some facial analysis. But when we tried that, there was a lot of resistance initially, saying was, I don't want to be seen on camera. It looks like it's, somebody is, Big Brother is watching me kinds. And of course, with a lot of other companies, you also had restrictions in terms of, who can use camera, whether IT team and InfoSec team will allow it, and that was too big of a, friction point for us, both from a user perspective and InfoSec perspective. So we said we'll do audio. Then the question came in saying, who's really going to work on, are we going to look at English? Or if you're doing it in Indian context, should we also consider Hindi or more importantly English? Because while all our learning and communication in offices happen in English, more often than not the conversation with our colleagues happen in regional languages, it happens in English. So the question was, are we going to force people to use English or certain language when we are looking at how they're going to implement some of this on field, or are we going to allow people to express themselves the way they would normally express themselves with colleagues, with cross-functional teams, etc., and look at how they're implementing some of this learning. So I think that was another decision point that we had. Then the next question that came in is, hey, when you say you have a role play, should we just allow it to go on infinitely? Should we limit it? How do we kind of put some boundaries around it, etc.? So we kind of overcame some of those points. The next thing that became very, very important for us was, how do we really make it contextual? So for us, the context came from three places, right? So first is, what is the context of the organization? So while we may say, hey, I'm an IT service company, I'm a manufacturing company, etc., the context varies quite a lot, because everybody is on their own learning journeys, everybody is on their own customer journeys. So how are we going to bring in the context? And more importantly, when you bring the context to the organization, you also have to bring the context of the role, because for one company, you would have 20 different people in 8 different roles. So I just can't say, hey, the company is this, AI, why don't you take on? So I'll have to also be able to define, what happens in each of these roles. And more importantly, what should I ask the AI to behave as? And that's where we kind of came up with breaking this into 2 parts, where we said, how are you going to define the AI persona? Which means, who is AI going to pretend to be? Is the AI going to pretend like a customer? Is the AI going to pretend to be a subordinate? Is the AI going to pretend to be an employee who's not got promoted last year but is expecting a promotion and major hike this year? Is the AI going to pretend to be a new teammate who's joined in last month and who's looking for clarity? So you can define that part. And more importantly, we said we should also be able to define the mood of the AI persona, because the conversation mood is very different. Sometimes people are very irritated, sometimes people are friendly, sometimes people are open, sometimes people are, busy. So how are you going to implement some of the learning that you have got in terms of specific competencies into different situations which cover both the persona and the mood of where they are coming in from? And one of the things that we also looked at is, how are you going to relate it to prior learning? Because it's not like we can just come in and say, hey, by the way, we've got Growiz, so why don't you kind of implement it? Because there's already 100 different things that's happened in the organization. There are 50 different things that are going on as part of learning journeys as we speak. So our question was that this can't be a standalone platform, or this can't be a standalone module which will come and say, you know what, everybody else move, we'll come and kind of do something which is amazing. So one of the most important things for us was to say, how are we going to integrate this as part of existing learning journeys, existing systems that already exist, so that the part about how people are implementing what they've learned is something that we will take care of. So for us, we were very clear that this is not an entire platform. We can't ask people to replace things that are already happening. So our question is to say, can we take one specific part where you're going to kind of figure out if people are able to implement what they learn, how are you going to take it to the team, start off from an existing place, integrate it back to an existing place. So that's something that was very important. And in terms of specific competencies, we initially, we kind of came up with our own competency frameworks. Where we said these are competencies, these are ratings, etc. And when we took them to our clients, nobody ended up using it. Because we kind of had competencies, and then clients came back saying, boss, this is all good, but I have my own set of competency frameworks. And I'm trying to calibrate my team and my people based on what I have. So while what you have done is not bad, I can't really use it. And that's when we realized the platform has to be in a position where it should be able to take inputs on what competencies do different clients have, and not just competencies. We realized that when we dug deeper, it not just spoke about what the competencies are, we also had to look at what the definition of each competency is, because that changed with different organizations. And more importantly, all organizations had their own calibration on what a competency level 1 means, what a competency level 3 means. And more challenging for us was, some companies had a 3-point calibration, some companies had a 5-point calibration, some companies it will be 0 to 4, somebody else it will be 1 to 5. So we realized that we had to kind of accommodate for all this, because the whole idea was to plug into what is already happening and not come up and say, hey, we've got something, you figure out what works, etc., etc. So I think we spent a lot of time to ensure that you start off by doing a simple Excel upload and you do it, etc. So we tried a lot of things. So this is one major challenge that we had to overcome in terms of helping AI understand this, because the moment you bring in multiple competencies, the moment you bring in multiple definitions, the ability for the AI to learn and continuously reduces drastically. But we had to kind of take a call saying, hey, am I going to look at making the system better, in a place that nobody wants to use, or take it a little slow but ensure that people are actually using it and still able to get something out of it rather than saying this is good. It's like, I think for us the question was, do you want to go fast in a road to a place that you don't want to go, kinds. So I think that becomes very important, and more importantly from a user perspective, I think one of the most important things for us was how are you really going to make it believable for the learner. Because if you make the learner go through a program, and if they walk back saying, "Yeah, but ये सब बेकार है, ये तो all this is good, but I'm never going to use it," then we have lost the plot. Because for them it becomes a tick box activity. So one of the main things that we focused on was to say, how are you going to ensure that from an AI perspective, how does the conversation sound hyper real? Which means it should be like, the AI should pretend like it's actually somebody in your team who's talking. So how do you take the conversations as close to reality? And second is, how do you ensure that the feedback you give at the end of this role play makes a lot of sense to them? They should look at it and say, yes, I agree with this feedback. So we again broke this into two parts, because on one side, there is of course a level of subjectivity that comes with AI. There is going to be an inherent bias, and those are not things that we can easily move out of. So which is where we said we're going to break this feedback into two parts. So on one side we said the feedback is going to be as objective as possible, which means I'm going to tell you that if you say that Arun, I want to look at how people are giving feedback, and when they give feedback to as part of their appraisal, I want them to keep in mind the following 6 points for any feedback. Then we are able to objectify it and say, hey, did you cover these 6 points? So there's no confusion about that. Based on the conversations they have, I can directly have a correlation. And this is, while AI is used, the learner can also know whether they've done it or not. So there is no question on this. The second part is the subjective feedback from AI, where the AI talks about what could have gone, what could have done well, what could you have done well, what has gone right, what has gone wrong. So there's a little bit of subjectivity where we say that is also something that you can calibrate. And there is a score to it where we say it's absolutely calibratable, because when I do a role play and let's say somebody from there rates it as a 4.5 on 5. Somebody here says, no Arun, this is a 2 on 5 for me. So which is right? We said both are right, because for somebody like you running a program for somebody like me, you may say, hey, you have done really well. I think for where you stand, Arun, 4.5 is amazing. But somebody here might say, no Arun, I expected more of you. So to me, I'm going to rate it at 2. And for us, the most important question was, how do you calibrate the score as well? Because I have to adhere to your standards and I can't bring in my own standards. So I think these are things that really, really mattered as part of what we did. And finally, the most important thing for us was how are you really going to look at getting this calibrated. So can I just put this screen up for a minute? I think this kind of has a life of like 10 seconds. So I'm just going to show you something that kind of is there for like 10 seconds. Yeah. We have this. So this is how you're finally looking at this, where you get your score. Okay, so I think I'm going to use this to my advantage. I'm going to say, hey, since we have tech problems here, we have a stall out there where you can actually like come and see this real time. Okay, but okay, not done yet. Okay, so I think the whole idea is that you actually speak. So the idea here is that you actually have a conversation. For example, one of the examples that I was going to show you, which unfortunately I'm not able to now, is to say, how are you really able to, let's say you're starting a new project and you have a new, let's say, software developer in your team. So how are you going to set expectations in them in terms of what you have to do in terms of the methodology you follow in terms of agile, the project scope, the review timelines, etc., etc. So now the expectation is that your employee is not going to ask you all the questions to really get clarity from you. So as part of building your communication skill, are you really able to cover some of these things? So that's where it is about. So I would really love to kind of show you a demo on this, but so I think we have one last shot at this, and the bell is already gone. Yeah, so I think this is where it is, where I get a feedback saying, hey, you did a good job, how did this go? Then here I say these are points to be covered, where I say there is going to be a, I say that as part of my communication for this project, where the whole context, so this is the description of this, So this is the description of this role play. It says you're a project manager about to lead a project kickoff for a new software development team, you're doing this, blah, blah. So this is more like you set a role play. Like what we do in the physical world, you set the context here. Then you look at what the feedback is, and you get to see what the points to be covered are. So here you see that, and this is the objective part. If I say, I expect you to cover these following points, you get a feedback saying, hey, was it covered, was it not covered, or was it partially covered? Because sometimes people would touch on some elements of it, but not go all the way through. And in their mind, they'll be like, but I've covered all this. But in reality, you know that this is not done. And you also get a small skill evaluation based on competencies that you want to evaluate. And these are going to be your competencies. And the best part is that I'm just going to play this conversation. So this is how the conversation started. For example, let's say,
project on CRM system that you have using for a client, and I think it's very important that
so this
you understand that you would.
So now I'm just going to quickly run through this. So this is.
Hey Ravi, thank you for entrusting me with this. However, I would appreciate if you could clarify the specifics. For instance, what are my main tasks and what's the project time scale?
So this is the new employee who's asking for details on what are the tasks, what am I doing, etc. And I go about this conversation. So
I think this is great thing. So I think we're going to be using agile methodology to drive these deliverables.
So I keep talking about how we are going to use agile methodology. Based on the conversation I had, the AI response, which means that if I kind of, for example, some extremes are also taken care of. In case I swear, then you can define how the AI should react. So for us, default was don't take any abuse, don't take any this thing. But in case you say that somebody is going to be more tolerable, you can set that as well. So you can actually define how everybody reacts, and this is something that you do that where you are able to see a lot of these things. So I think I'll kind of close it from here. I think I've already taken my time. So I hope this gave you some insight on how we as a company are looking to include AI as part of it, because for us there are certain places where AI really works. There are certain places where AI doesn't work, and for us this is one place where AI definitely works, because the permutation combinations are infinite, and that's a place where we said AI is something that should work. So thanks a lot for your time. Appreciate this, and sorry for the tech goof ops. I think I should have been more careful with this. But nonetheless, we have our stall there, so in case any of you want to get more information, we are available to help you out. So thanks a lot, folks. Appreciate your time, and
Thanks a lot, Mr. Arun Subramanian, for sharing your thoughts on the effectiveness in the age of AI with conversational roleplay. To do the honors, I request Mr. Kamal Sahadev, Director of Human Resources at Delta Electronics, to please join us on the dais.